The toast was his idea. That's the part I keep coming back to. The night everything ended, my father was the one who picked up the wine glass. My father clinked it with a butter knife until the dining room went quiet. My father looked at me across the length of his table. 12 chairs, pressed linen, the good china his mother left him. He said the words I had been waiting 47 years to hear him say. "To Diane," he announced, 22 years of service, 3 deployments, our family hero. He smiled. The table applauded. I smiled back. My laptop bag was under my chair. Inside the bag was a 94-page bound forensic report, tabbed and indexed. Inside that report was every transfer, every forged document, every access log, every dollar, 187,400 of them, that had moved from my military retirement account into accounts I did not open, in my name, using a password I had once trusted him with. I had driven 11 hours from Colorado Springs to Boise the day before. I had stopped once for gas outside Salt Lake City. I had been carrying everything I needed for 14 months. I raised my glass. Thank you, Dad. His girlfriend, Renata, beamed from the chair to his right. My Uncle Gerald reached across the table to squeeze my shoulder. The smell of the room was cedar and something synthetic. A candle on the sideboard trying to smell like a real tree. Outside the window, the Boise night was cold and clear. The neighborhood looked exactly the way it always had. Quiet, comfortable, uncomplicated. My father stood at the head of his table. He was surrounded by the things he loved most in this world. The good china, the good wine, the warm glow of being admired. He had absolutely no idea what was sitting underneath my chair. He thought this dinner was a celebration. He was half right. But to understand what happened that Christmas Eve in Boise, Idaho, you have to understand a few things first. You have to understand what a military thrift savings plan actually is, and what it means to watch one get quietly emptied over 18 months. You have to understand what a limited power of attorney grants, and what it means when someone deliberately exceeds those limits. And you have to understand what it is to spend 22 years building a particular kind of patience, not the passive kind, not the kind that comes from weakness, the kind that comes from knowing at a cellular level that the complete picture is worth more than the immediate confrontation. My father had mistaken that patience for something else entirely. He was about to find out what it actually was. My name is Diane Calloway. I am 47 years old. I was born in Meridian, Idaho, which sits close enough to Boise. Whenever I come back, I feel the specific weight of a place that has known you since before you knew yourself, and has not necessarily kept pace with who you became. I joined the Army at 25, which is late by most enlistment standards. I had a degree in computer science by then, 2 years of telecommunications infrastructure work behind me, and a restlessness I could not name clearly enough to address any other way. The recruiter's office was 3 blocks from where I worked. I walked in on a Tuesday afternoon in January. I asked what they had for someone who found patterns in things other people read as noise. They sent me to intelligence training. 22 years followed. Signals intelligence, 3 deployments. Iraq in 2004, Afghanistan in 2009, Afghanistan again in 2019 when I was 43 years old. The soldiers I was working alongside sometimes assumed I was someone's supervisor visiting from the rear. I was not. I was the analyst running 12-hour shifts reading intercepts, cross-referencing communications logs, finding the thread, connecting what looked like disconnected noise into something a commander could act on. I retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 4 in August 2021. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Colorado Springs. I drive a 2017 Civic with 84,000 miles on it. I grow cherry tomatoes on my balcony in the summer. At night, I remove my hearing aid and the world goes quiet. I have come to regard this as one of the genuine privileges of my condition. The hearing aid is in my left ear, a result of an IED blast in Kandahar province in the spring of 2009. I was treated and returned to duty. 2 colleagues in that vehicle were not as fortunate. I mention this not for sympathy, but because it is part of the accurate picture of who I am. Someone who has survived difficult things by staying steady and keeping track. I do not lose things. I do not overlook things. I do not misplace documents or forget account numbers or fail to notice when a balance is wrong. My father understood this about me when I was 12 years old. I corrected his checkbook at the kitchen table. He smiled at me and said approvingly, "You're sharp." Then he spent the next 35 years operating as though I wasn't. I said nothing. I was counting. The power of attorney was entirely my idea. That is the detail people find hardest to absorb when I explain what happened. In the spring of 2019, when I received orders for my 3rd deployment, I initiated the conversation. I owned a small condo in Colorado Springs that I was renting out to a young couple. I had a car payment, a storage unit, 2 utilities in my name, and the ordinary administrative friction of a life that doesn't pause for a combat rotation. I needed someone stateside who could handle the rare signature, the occasional phone call, the things that come up when you are 11 time zones away and unavailable. My father lived 45 minutes from my storage unit. He was retired. He had time. He had, as far as I could determine in April 2019, no particular reason to betray me. We were not close. We had never been close. Not in the way fathers and daughters sometimes describe, with ease and warmth and a shared language. But we were civil. We were functional. He came to my retirement ceremony in August 2021. I thought, watching him clap from the 2nd row, that was probably the most sustained attention he had ever paid me. But in 2019, I called him. I explained what I needed. He agreed without hesitation. Before we hung up, he added something, offhand, the way a person says something they consider too obvious to require emphasis. "Don't worry about keeping track of everything," he said. "That's what family is for." I said I'd send the documents in the morning. After we hung up, I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand. Don't worry about keeping track. 22 years of signals intelligence. He had just told me to stop doing the one thing I was specifically trained never to stop doing. I sent him the POA documents the next morning. I began a new spreadsheet that afternoon. I emailed him the limited power of attorney documents in April. He had them notarized at a UPS store in Boise on May 9th. I know the date because it is on the notarized copy, which I have reviewed many times since. The POA was explicit. It authorized him to act on my behalf for the Colorado Springs condo lease, the storage unit account, and 2 specific utilities. It explicitly excluded, in plain language, I had a paralegal friend review before I sent it, any authority over federal financial accounts. My thrift savings plan was a federal financial account. I deployed in June 2019. 6 weeks later, the first transfer happened. I did not know this at the time. I was in Kabul. I was working. That first Christmas home, December 2019, things looked fine. My father's house had a new roof. He'd been talking about fixing the leak for years, so I didn't remark on it. The kitchen had new granite countertops. Renata, who had appeared in his life the previous year, was clearly comfortable in the house, knew where everything was kept, used the word "we" when she talked about the renovation. I noticed all of this the way I notice most things, quietly, without comment, filing it in the general category of developments I would think about later. There was a new candle on the sideboard. Cedar and balsam, the label said, in a dark glass jar. It smelled like something working very hard to smell like a forest, like something that had studied forests from a distance and was presenting its best approximation. I noted it the way I noted everything, without comment. I filed it beside the new roof and the granite countertops. In the column I wasn't yet calling a column. I flew back to Kabul in January 2020. The transfers continued. Not in one large movement. That was the part that showed deliberate thought. Small amounts first. $2,100 in July 2019. $1,800 in September. $3,400 in November. Then larger. $7,200 in February 2020. $9,800 in May, $14,800 in August. Always irregular, always spaced to avoid the patterns that trigger automatic review. Always staying below the thresholds that generate mandatory bank reports. Here's what you need to understand about a thrift savings plan if you have never held one. It is a federal retirement account equivalent to a 401k. And it is designed to be quiet. Unless you configure it for transaction alerts, and in 2019 I had not, it does not notify you of every action. You check it when you think to check it. On a combat deployment, during a 12-hour intelligence rotation, quarterly felt like due diligence. I had $241,300 in my TSP when I boarded that flight to Kabul. 18 months later, I finally sat down at my own kitchen table with a real cup of coffee. With my complete financial picture in front of me, I had $187,400 less than I should have had. 41 transactions, $187,400, 18 months. The math took 3 minutes. I wrote one number in my green government issue notebook, the same notebook I had carried since my first deployment in 2004, worn at the spine and smelling faintly of the desert. One number, underlined once. Then I wrote 3 words beneath it. Who has access? I did not call my father. I did not send a text. I did not ask a single question of anyone. I said nothing. I was counting. The account the money transferred into was opened in my name, using an email address I had created in 2001, a Yahoo address from before smartphones, before the military, before I understood what it meant to secure a digital identity. I had migrated away from that address years ago, but never formally closed it. The password was the name of my childhood dog, followed by my birth year. A password I had spoken aloud to my father in 2014 over the phone. I helped him set up an account and used mine as the example. He had said he was writing it down. He wrote it down. From that old Yahoo address, someone had opened a checking account at an online bank. Someone had applied for a Visa card attached to that account. Someone had submitted a signature on the account application. A signature that was supposed to be mine, but was not mine. Not quite. Not if you knew where to look. The Visa card had been used at a granite countertop supplier in Boise, at a truck dealership in Nampa, at an airline for 2 tickets to Cabo San Lucas in February 2020, while I was in Afghanistan, while the pandemic was beginning, while 41 transfers were pulling the floor out from under my retirement. The truck was delivered to his driveway in October 2019. I know the exact month because it appears in the transfer records. $14,800, October 11th. I was in Kabul. I was still driving the same 2017 Civic I'd bought used 3 years earlier. I'd been meaning to get the brakes looked at since August. The granite countertops were installed in November. I know this because the home improvement store card, opened in my name at my old email address, has a statement for $6,200 that month. In November 2019, the only thing I purchased was a base rate coffee at the canteen for $1.20. I remember because I only had American cash and the canteen didn't make change. He spent my money on granite. I spent my money on coffee. Neither of us knew yet that I was keeping count. I found all of this in the evenings at my kitchen table in Colorado Springs. Over 6 weeks of careful and methodical reading. Each night after work, between 9 p.m. and midnight, I opened the laptop and went 1 layer deeper. I logged into the Yahoo address. The password still worked. I read 52 emails I had never sent and never seen, notifications of accounts I had never opened, confirmations of transactions I had never authorized. Each one I printed, each one I filed. Each dollar amount went into my green notebook. $2,100, $1,800, $3,400, $7,200, $9,800, $14,800, 17 more entries after that. Building the column, building the total, building the case for what this was. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, a plan. Have you ever trusted someone completely? Handed them, in writing, a piece of your life, and then discovered, quietly and alone at your kitchen table, that they had been treating that trust like a checking account? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between reacting immediately and building the complete picture first? And if you believe quiet discipline is its own form of power, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel. New stories premiere every day at 7:30 p.m. I want to tell you about one specific night, not the first night I found the transfers. I have already described that. I want to tell you about the night I found the email that confirmed everything. It was a Tuesday in January 2021, 2:23 in the morning. Colorado Springs in January comes through walls even when the insulation is good. I was sitting at my kitchen table in a thermal undershirt and flannel pants. The coffee in my mug had gone cold at some point, and I had not noticed when. The laptop screen was the only light in the room. I had been inside the Yahoo account for 90 minutes, reading carefully, building the timeline entry by entry when I found it. Not a bank notification, an email from an identity verification service, the kind that companies use to confirm you are who you say you are when you open a new account online. The email was dated October 14th, 2019, 4 months into my deployment. Your identity has been successfully verified. Your account application is now complete. I looked at the IP address embedded in the email log. Then I opened a second tab and ran the IP address through a geolocation tool. Boise, Idaho. The timestamp was 11:48 p.m. on a Thursday night. I sat without moving for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside on the street. These were the sounds in the room. Then I picked up my green notebook and clicked my pen twice. A habit from deployment, checking equipment before you use it. I wrote the IP address. I wrote the date. I wrote 11:48 p.m., Thursday, October 2019. Then I wrote one more line below those facts. He knew exactly what he was doing. Not a suspicion. A conclusion, supported by documented evidence. There is a difference between those two things, and 22 years in intelligence work had made me precise about the difference. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it something plain. Expenses, 2019 to 2021. Inside that folder, I created subfolders, transfers, accounts, documents, emails, timeline. I moved the first files. Then I made a fresh cup of coffee, sat back down, and kept working, counting. Not in anger, not in grief, counting. 14 months is a long time to say nothing. People who have never worked in intelligence sometimes ask how analysts manage what they call compartmentalization, how you hold something critical in your mind and continue operating as though you don't. The answer is simpler than it sounds. You remind yourself that the goal is the complete picture, not the immediate relief of showing someone what you know. Partial revelation destroys a case, complete revelation ends one. I went back to Colorado Springs. I reported for work at my civilian defense contractor position. I attended family events in Boise as scheduled. I sat across from my father at his kitchen table, at a restaurant booth, at a holiday gathering. I watched him use a credit card I didn't recognize and talk about Renata's daughter's graduation trip to Europe. I asked appropriate questions and passed the bread rolls, and I said nothing. I was building. By March 2021, I had identified and documented the following. 1, fraudulent checking account opened in my name using my old email address and a forged signature. 1 Visa card attached to that account. 1 additional store card at a home improvement retailer in Nampa, Idaho. 2 documents bearing a forged version of my signature. Total unauthorized withdrawals from my federal TSP account, $187,400. Total fraudulent credit utilization in my name, $29,800. Combined financial damage, $217,200. That spring, I contacted a forensic accountant I had served with. She left the Army in 2018 and went private, building a practice in financial crimes analysis. I sent her my complete file. 3 weeks later, she called me. When she finished her assessment, she used a specific word. Clean, she said. Diane, this case is clean. Every dollar is documented. There was a pause on the line. Then she said something I hadn't asked her to say. In 14 years doing this work, I've seen people bring me a shoebox of bank statements they couldn't explain. I've had clients show up with a screenshot and a feeling. Another pause. What you built here, this isn't a complaint. This is a case. Whoever trained you to document, they trained you right. I thanked her and ended the call. I didn't tell her it wasn't the Army that trained me. It was 22 years of understanding one simple thing. The evidence either speaks for itself or it doesn't. You cannot be in the room arguing on its behalf. There was also the matter of the signature. When you sign your name on military documents for 22 years, your hand develops a specific muscle memory. My real signature has a characteristic I did not consciously choose: a small rightward hook on the descending tail of the final letter in Calloway, consistent across every official document I have signed since approximately 2003. The forged signature on the fraudulent account application did not have it. The hook was absent. That discrepancy appears on page 47 of the 94-page report, annotated with a red arrow and a 2-line technical note from my forensic accountant. One small detail my father had missed. It was enough to prove everything. In the summer of 2021, I contacted the VA Office of Inspector General through their financial fraud hotline. The investigator I spoke with was patient and thorough and told me that what I was describing was not an unusual pattern. By November, they had opened a formal investigation running parallel to my file, following their own process. In December, I had a 55-minute phone consultation with a federal criminal attorney in Denver. She reviewed the summary I sent her before the call. Within the first 10 minutes, she used the same word. Clean, she said. Ms. Calloway, this is a clean case. $187,400 stolen from a federal account, explicitly excluded from the power of attorney I had granted. $29,800 in fraudulent credit accumulated in my name. 2 forged documents. 18 months of unauthorized access through a compromised email address. Wire fraud, identity fraud, power of attorney abuse. The 94-page report confirmed each element with documentation. I booked my Christmas Eve flight to Boise on December 2nd. I packed the report in the laptop bag with my green notebook. I had been preparing for this flight for 14 months. I slept well the night before I drove to the airport. I always sleep well when a case is complete. The dining room smelled like cedar and something synthetic. That candle on the sideboard, trying to be a real tree. The salmon Renata had prepared sat in its silver dish, growing cold at the center of the table. My father was on his 3rd glass of the wine he couldn't have afforded 4 years ago, talking about the plans for his garage. Epoxy floor, new shelving system, maybe a small workshop area. While Gerald nodded with the practiced attention of a man who has spent decades listening to his brother. Outline projects that someone else will probably complete. I sat at my father's right hand, which was where he had placed me, the guest of honor. I kept my hands in my lap and my face arranged in a pleasant, interested expression. My laptop bag was under my chair. The report was in the bag. Everything I had built for 14 months was in the bag, waiting. The way something deliberately placed always waits. My father set down his wine glass and looked around the table with the satisfied expression of a man at the center of his world. The good china, the pressed linen. Renata, poised and attentive at his left. Gerald and his wife. The room warm and lit and arranged exactly the way he wanted it. He picked up his glass again. He reached for the butter knife. The clink of silver on crystal brought the room to attention. "I want to say something," he said. His voice was comfortable, the register of a man who has said things at the head of tables before and found it agreed with him. He looked at me. 22 years is not a small thing, 3 deployments. You served this country when most people your age were doing something else entirely. He paused. In that pause was what I recognized, correctly, as genuine feeling. Not performed, not strategic, real. I'm proud of you, Diane. I want to say that in front of people. Our family hero. The table raised their glasses. I looked at my father across the candles and the good china and the synthetic cedar smell. I kept my face composed and warm, the way you learn to keep your face when a great deal depends on people not knowing what you are doing. "Thank you, Dad," I said. Then I reached under my chair and placed the laptop bag on the table. The shift in the room was immediate and subtle. The slight recalibration that happens when someone does something unexpected in a comfortable environment. Gerald lowered his glass slightly. Renata's smile held, but the quality of it changed. The way a held breath is different from a natural one. My father tilted his head. "A presentation?" I unzipped the bag without rushing. I removed the laptop. I removed the manila folder. 94 pages, bound at the top left corner with a binder clip, and I set it on the linen beside the laptop. The folder landed with a quiet, specific sound, not dramatic, deliberate. "There's something I've been meaning to share with you," I said. I opened the laptop. I had the spreadsheet loaded and waiting, a habit from work. Always have the document ready before the meeting starts. I turned the screen toward my father. The spreadsheet filled the display. First column, dates, running from July 2019 to December 2020. Second column, dollar amounts. Each one entered cleanly, right aligned. Third column, account identifiers, 41 rows. At the bottom, in a bold cell formatted in red, $187,400. My father's expression did not change immediately. He was still in the comfortable register. The host, the patriarch, the man who had just delivered a toast. He looked at the screen the way you look at something your mind has not yet processed. Eyes moving across the columns, back to the top, down again. What is this? Still comfortable, still expecting an explanation that would resolve it. "Page 47, I said. I opened the folder and removed 2 sheets, one with my real signature collected from 22 years of official documents, and one with the forged signature from the fraudulent account application. I set both pages on the tablecloth in front of him, sliding them slowly across the pressed linen. They made no sound landing. "Your account opening, October 2019. The room was completely still. Gerald put his wine glass down on the table. The small sound it made was the only sound in the room. My father picked up the 2 pages. He held them. He looked at them for a long moment in which I could observe precisely the thing that was happening behind his eyes. The story he had been telling himself, meeting the story the documents were telling. These are different stories. They cannot both be true. The documents do not accommodate revision." He looked up. The comfortable expression was gone. In its place was something I recognized from 22 years of work. The specific look of a person whose account of reality has just stopped working. "I don't understand what you're implying," he said. I did not explain. I did not expand. I did not offer the emotional confrontation he could have deflected, or the accusation he could have argued with. I slid the 94-page report across the tablecloth toward him. It made a soft sound landing on the linen. 94 pages. 14 months of careful, documented, professionally verified work. The federal investigators have a copy as well. That was when Renata stood up, not gracefully. The chair scraped backward across the hardwood, with the sound of something involuntary. She said something I could not hear clearly on my left side, the deaf side, but I watched her face the way I have learned to watch faces when I cannot hear the words, and I understood what her face said. She knew. She had known for some time. Page 61 of the report documents a single transfer of $8,200 from the fraudulent checking account into a personal account in Renata's name, November 17th, 2020. One transaction, one documented connection. My father did not move. He was still holding the 2 pages I had placed in front of him. His hands were completely still. The stillness of a person conserving all available energy for the task of understanding what is happening to them. The candle on the sideboard had stopped flickering. The room was very quiet. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked at my father across the good china and the cold salmon and 14 months of patience. And I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The documents had said everything. Federal agents do not come on Christmas. They came the morning after, December 25th, at 7:42 a.m. While Boise was quiet under 2 inches of new snow, and the neighborhood looked the way it always did on Christmas morning, sealed, domestic, undisturbed. I was in my hotel room 11 minutes away when my phone showed the notification confirming the arrest. I was drinking coffee from the in-room machine, which was not good coffee, sitting in the chair by the window, watching snow fall on the parking lot in the gray early light. The VA OIG and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit had been running their own parallel investigation for 6 months. My 94-page report, delivered to the coordinating investigator on December 23rd, was corroborating documentation for a case that was already substantially built. They did not need me to be there. I was not there. I was in a hotel room in Boise, Idaho, drinking bad coffee and watching snow. And for the first time in 14 months, I was not building anything. There was nothing left to build. I opened my green notebook. I wrote 1 line on the last used page. December 25. Done. I looked at it for a moment. Then I closed the notebook. 3 weeks after Christmas, I drove past his house on the way to the airport. Early morning, the neighborhood was still dark. The driveway was empty. Not the ordinary empty of someone at the grocery store. The kind of empty where something used to be and isn't anymore. Where the concrete shows a slightly different shade in the shape of a rectangle. The outline of something large that stood there long enough to leave a mark. The truck was gone. I didn't slow down. I had a flight to catch. The case moved over the following months with the measured, unsentimental pace of federal financial proceedings. My father was charged with wire fraud, identity fraud, and power of attorney abuse. Renata was charged with 1 count of receiving stolen funds. The fraudulent accounts were frozen within 48 hours of the arrest. The remaining balance in those accounts, $41,200 that had not yet been withdrawn, was recovered immediately. The remaining $146,200 already spent on granite countertops and a truck and a trip to Cabo, and an epoxy garage floor and the comfortable architecture of a life funded by my retirement account. Was the subject of civil restitution proceedings. The resolution, reached 8 months later, involved a plea to a single count of federal wire fraud, probation, a structured restitution order, $187,400 to be repaid across 7 years, secured against whatever remained of my father's own retirement savings, and the equity in the Boise house. Renata's case resolved separately. I did not attend either proceeding. The documents had made their appearance. I had nothing to add. My forensic accountant sent me a text message the afternoon the plea was entered. Clean, from start to finish. I laughed out loud, alone in the parking lot outside my office building in Colorado Springs, on a Tuesday in August, with the sun doing what the sun does in August at altitude. Direct and unambiguous, the way evidence is supposed to be. That spring, April, mild. The tomatoes on my balcony, not yet planted, but the pots already cleaned and waiting. I drove to the post office after work to complete the final piece of civil paperwork. On the way back to the apartment, I stopped at a gas station and filled the tank. I stood outside in the mild evening air while the pump ran, not thinking about anything particular. Across from me, a man in a red coat was on his phone, laughing about something private. At the next pump, a kid was bouncing in the back seat of an SUV with the specific, frantic energy of a child who has been in a car too long. The gas station smelled like gasoline and the fried chicken from the convenience store attached to it. A country song was playing from somewhere I couldn't identify. I was not thinking about my father. I was not thinking about the money. I was not reviewing the timeline or rehearsing what I could have done differently in 2019, or calculating what 14 months of disciplined patience had cost me, in ways that cannot be entered into a spreadsheet. I was watching the kid bounce in the back seat and thinking he looked like he was having a very acceptable Tuesday afternoon. The pump clicked off, I replaced the nozzle, I got in my car. I am not my father's emergency fund. I am not the daughter who doesn't notice. I am not the self-sufficient one who can absorb whatever is taken from her because she appears capable of replacing it. I put down every version of that person the evening I slid those 2 pages across the white tablecloth, under the light of a candle that smelled like a synthetic tree. I said nothing for 14 months. Then I said, exactly enough. I want to talk to you about something that has nothing to do with wire fraud or 94-page forensic reports. I want to talk to you about the role. Not a role you chose, the one assigned to you early, before you had any vocabulary for what was happening. Every family has an architecture, and in that architecture, certain people are placed in certain positions. The capable one, the reliable one, the one who handles things, who doesn't complain, the one who gets back up without requiring an audience for the getting up, the one whose achievements are noted and immediately expected to continue, and whose needs are assumed without anyone actually asking to be fully met by the fact of their own competence. Maybe you know this assignment. Maybe you have been performing it for so long that it no longer feels like a performance. Maybe it feels like your personality. Maybe you have told yourself, because this is what people in this role tell themselves, because it is the story that makes the role sustainable, that independence is a virtue, that needing acknowledgement is weakness, that the discipline you've built is its own reward, and that is enough. I want to gently and directly tell you that story is not entirely accurate. Capability is not consent. Being good at handling difficult things is not the same as agreeing to handle everything. Being self-sufficient is not the same as forfeiting your right to protection. And the quiet competence that others have come to rely on, that they have perhaps come to treat as a resource available for their use, is not a gift you owe them indefinitely. It is something you built. It belongs to you. The people who benefit most from your competence without acknowledging it have made a choice. Maybe an unconscious one. Maybe one they would passionately defend if confronted, but a choice nonetheless. And beneath that choice, if you look at it clearly without flinching, is a specific assumption that you will absorb the cost, that you will not notice, or will notice and not act, or will act and then relent when pressure is applied, that your silence is a form of permission. It is not. My father looked at a daughter who had served 3 combat deployments, who had spent 22 years reading patterns in encrypted signals, who had built a retirement account from zero through disciplined quarterly contributions over 2 decades. And he decided she was someone who would not notice $187,400 moving out of her account in 41 transactions over 18 months. That was not a mistake. Mistakes come from insufficient information. He had all the information he needed. He chose to act on a wish instead. The wish that I was the version of me that would miss it. People like that are not reading you accurately. They are reading their own convenience, their own comfort, their own preferred version of who you are. They want you to be less than you are, less attentive, less capable, less likely to open a laptop bag at the right moment. They have mistaken your patience for passivity. They have mistaken your silence for surrender. I want to say something directly to anyone who recognizes the role I am describing, the reliable one, the capable one, the person who has spent years being the family member everyone counts on, right up to the moment they needed something in return. You are allowed to protect yourself, not dramatically, not retaliatorily, quietly, thoroughly, with documentation and patience, and the full weight of whatever expertise you have spent your life developing. You do not owe anyone an emotional confrontation they can reframe as an attack. You do not owe anyone an explanation they can walk away from dismissing. You do not owe anyone the spectacle of watching you fall apart before the evidence lands on the table. The most powerful thing a capable person can do is exactly what capable people do. Gather the information completely, organize it clearly, present it without embellishment, then let it work. Some practical truths, because this is a story about money, and I believe in being direct about money. Review your financial accounts regularly, regardless of how much you trust the people in your life. Not out of suspicion, out of the same basic stewardship you would apply to anything else you have worked to build. A 30-minute quarterly review is not paranoia. It is the minimum attention your future self deserves. If you grant a power of attorney to anyone, especially family, particularly family, because the people closest to you have the most access and the most opportunity. Understand in plain language what you are granting and what you are explicitly excluding. Have it reviewed before you sign it. An attorney's consultation fee is a small fraction of what correcting a violation costs later. In money and in time and in the particular kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from having to prove what should never have needed proving. If you ever discover that something is wrong, with an account, with a balance, with a document that does not match what you remember signing, start the file before you start the conversation. Document first, confront later, or never, depending on what the documentation tells you. Evidence does not get more solid by waiting, but it becomes vastly more powerful when it is complete before anyone knows you are looking. And if someone tells you that you are being overcautious or paranoid, or that family doesn't operate on those terms, understand this: the people who benefit most from your uncritical trust are the people most motivated to tell you that exercising judgment is a betrayal. I carried a green government issue notebook from my first deployment to my last. I bought it at a supply depot in Kuwait in 2004. It went with me to Iraq, to Afghanistan twice, to dozens of intelligence briefings and late-night work sessions and moments I needed to record something precisely and immediately. By December 2021, it had become the kind of object that has absorbed enough of your life, that it carries a weight separate from its physical weight. The last entry is from Christmas Eve in Boise, Idaho, written in my hotel room the night before I drove to my father's house for dinner. It is not dramatic. It is a single line, because by then there was only one thing left to note. Not anger, not anticipation, a fact ready to be delivered. 14 months of building, one evening at a table with good china and a candle that smelled like a synthetic tree. 94 pages and a spreadsheet and 2 signatures side by side on page 47, one of them real and one of them not. And a red arrow pointing at a hook that was absent. The receipts do not have to shout. They just have to be accurate and present. That is enough. It has always been enough. My father's house smelled like a cedar candle that wasn't made of cedar. That detail stays with me. Not because it was significant on its own, but because it was accurate. Some things present themselves as one thing and are quietly another. The countertops looked like prosperity. The truck looked like success. The toast looked like pride. None of it was wrong, exactly, but none of it was what it appeared to be, either, because the foundation underneath it was built on 41 unauthorized transfers from a federal account that was never his to touch. A candle can smell like a forest. That doesn't make it a forest. The only way to know the difference is to read past the label. And when the label has been removed, to follow the transaction. If the reliable one in your family is you, if you are the one who shows up, who keeps track, who handles things without being asked, who has spent years being precisely the person others assume will absorb whatever they direct toward you, I want you to hear this. Your competence is not their safety net. Your patience is not their permission slip. Your silence is strategy, not acceptance. And when you are ready, whenever you decide the complete picture is assembled, the evidence will say what needs to be said. You won't have to raise your voice. You just have to slide the pages across the tablecloth. That's all it takes. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it with someone who may need this reminder today. The following Christmas, I sat at my own table in Colorado Springs. Small table, 1 chair occupied. Outside the window, the Rockies were somewhere behind the dark. I made a simple dinner, nothing elaborate. I opened a bottle of wine, a decent one, bought with my own money, from a store 3 blocks from my apartment, and poured 1 glass. Nobody clinked a butter knife against crystal. Nobody made a toast. I sat in the quiet of my own apartment with my own good china, 2 plates bought at an estate sale in 2018 for $11. And I did not need anyone to stand up and say anything. The accounting was already done. I called this story The Toast, because that is what it was really about. Not the spreadsheet, not the federal charges, not the 94 pages. It was about a man who picked up a wine glass and looked at his daughter and delivered the words that came easiest, our family hero, without ever once pausing to wonder what that heroism had cost her, or what silence looked like in the house across town while she was paying for it. He thought he was honoring me with that toast. He was, in a sense. He was honoring exactly the qualities he had spent 35 years underestimating. The patience, the precision, the willingness to wait, Wait until the complete picture was assembled before presenting it. He raised his glass to the woman who had been quietly counting since before he knew she was counting. I raised mine back. The difference was that I knew what we were really celebrating.